And New York State is still counting mail-in ballots from its Democratic House primary elections 2 weeks ago. That has delayed an expected victory lap for 3 progressive black men who are all likely to represent New York in the House this fall. 2 of those men will make history as the first openly gay black members of Congress. I spoke with one of them, Mondaire Jones, about what his victory means last week here on CBSN.
I grew up poor, black, and gay, and I never imagined running for Congress, and nor did I imagine that I could actually win such an election, because I had never seen someone like myself in the halls of power, certainly not in the halls of Congress. And so it would be a tremendous, I think, victory for people all throughout this country.
I want to bring in the other man who will make history in the House. That is Ritchie Torres. He's a Democrat running to represent New York's 15th congressional district. Welcome, Ritchie, and congratulations on your likely win. You are expected to be the first openly gay Afro-Latino member of Congress. And in the process, you've also likely knocked off a candidate in Ruben Diaz Sr. with a history of openly homophobic remarks. So what does this mean to you, especially at this point in U.S. history?
It's a historic breakthrough for LGBTQ representation. It's one thing to have an openly LGBTQ congressional candidate in the traditional neighborhoods of New York City, like Chelsea or the Village. It's something else to have it in the South Bronx, in the place that you would least expect. And in my race, the front runner was a man by the name of Ruben Diaz Sr. Many in the political establishment said that he could not be beaten, that this race could not be won. And so to defeat the most anti-LGBTQ elected official as an openly LGBTQ candidate is the best way to celebrate Pride in the month of June.
And Ritchie, the district that you are running to represent is the poorest in the country by median income. It is also the most diverse, with 97% of constituents identifying as a person of color. So how does all of this influence the policies you plan to endorse? And what do you believe that your constituents need that they are not currently getting from Congress?
Well, I grew up almost all my life in the Bronx, so I know what it's like to be left behind by the federal government. You know, the greatest challenge confronting not only the Bronx, but also the city and the country is the affordability crisis. More than half the residents in the South Bronx pay more than half their rent toward their income, and that's before you factor in the cost of utilities, prescription drugs, food, and transportation. And so my highest priority is to ensure that every American in need has access to housing vouchers, which would ensure that rent is no more than 30% of income. For me, affordable housing is more than brick and mortar. It's the foundation on which you build a better life for yourself and your family, and it's desperately needed, not only in the South Bronx, but throughout the country.
You know, Ritchie, I began my career as a journalist at News 12 The Bronx. I have a great affinity for that borough. I think it is filled with wonderful, you know, hard-working people. You know, glad that they have a representative that has their best interests at heart. Now, so, you know, New York's 15th district is also the bluest in the country, with 94% of voters backing Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. How do you think progressive candidates, such as yourself, can expand that sort of message that obviously resonates in your district, but how can you expand that message to other parts of the country?
Well, I won for 2 overarching reasons that could apply broadly beyond my district. First is my youth. You know, at age 32, I am in a position to represent the next generation of leadership. And voters are hungering for an infusion of new blood and energy in politics. And second, you know, I bring the wisdom of lived experience. I grew up almost all my life in poverty, in public housing, living in conditions of mold and mildew, leaks and lead, without reliable heat and hot water in the winter. I was raised by a single mother who had to raise 3 children on minimum wage, which in the 1990s was $4.25. And so the voters saw themselves, their own struggles, their own lived experiences in me. And that's what voters want. Voters want candidates who are accessible, who are human, and who not only know, but have lived their struggles in life.
So you may believe that to be true, but progressives are still vastly outnumbered in Congress, especially among Democratic leadership. Many of the members who helped bring back the majority into the House are moderates from swing districts. So, how do you plan to advocate for progressive policies when you first will have to convince many of your fellow Democrats?
Look, it's clear to me that the Democratic Party is moving in a far more progressive direction. We have a new generation of leaders entering Congress, and there is increasingly a consensus in the Democratic Party that healthcare and housing are both human rights. We often speak of American exceptionalism. The tragic fact is that America is exceptionally cruel toward its own people. We're the only country in the industrialized world that fails to offer universal health care, universal education, universal paid time in the workplace. And I'm confident that the Democratic Party is committed to building the kind of comprehensive social safety net that is taken for granted elsewhere in the industrialized world, that is the consensus of the new Democratic Party.
And Ritchie, as you know, New York City, the Bronx, the whole country has seen seismic protests over the recent killing of George Floyd, and there have been calls to revamp entirely law enforcement. Where do you stand on policies toward doing that?
Look, we need to fundamentally reform policing in America. We have to rethink the notion that the police calling 911 is the answer to every problem. We have to civilianize our responses to substance abuse, addiction, homelessness, and even violence. There are community-based approaches like Cure Violence that recruit former gang members and have those former gang members reach out to young gang members in the hopes of steering them away from violence. And that kind of face-to-face outreach has been shown to be effective at reducing violence without over-criminalizing communities of color. And then we have to end the doctrine of qualified immunity, which treats the badge as a license to kill, as a license to brutalize Black and brown lives. What is important is accountability. Officers who abuse their power, who engage in misconduct, should be held accountable. No one is above the law and no one is beneath the law.
All right. Well, Ritchie Torres, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
It was an honor to be here. Thank you.